makes you feel like you're 3 foot tall. When it's just you, well, times can be tough. When there's no one there to catch or fall. 3 foot tall. Like you're 3 foot tall. 3 foot tall.
What's up, guys? Ignore the mess behind me. I have wall art back there that needs to be hung up. I have boxes everywhere. We are working on setting up this stream. I have a new webcam that is in 1080p, so hopefully that is in good quality and a good position. If you have suggestions on layouts or things like that that I can use to improve the stream, let me know, and so we can make these adjustments and just get the quality that much better. Right now I have this headset microphone, so bear with me until the new microphone gets here and the new setup gets all set up. But for now, we have a pretty good stream, but it's only going to get better. We should have some of the highest quality streams coming very soon. But what we want to talk about right now is the loadouts. There's a lot to talk about, there's a lot to cover, so in this video I'm just going to cover the very basics. If you've played for several hours and you understand the basics and understand the mechanics of loading out, then this video is probably not for you. I want to cover some of the mechanics first, and then we'll get into class breakdowns and how to choose a class and why you should choose certain classes. Alright, so first things first, we're going to talk about weight. That's one of the key mechanics of loading out. You're going to take into consideration your weight. Everything you pick pretty much adds weight. So as you pick certain things, you're going to see if it adds weight and determine whether or not that is going to be a deciding factor on what you take. So as you can see in these weapon attachments, pretty much everything is the same weight. Certain weapons weigh more or less than others, things like that. So consider the weight. Next thing we want to take is supply count. So you have a set amount of supply count. In the co-op modes, and I think in this mode, I think this is offline, you get 20 points. So you get quite a bit, and you can take quite a few things with this 20 points. However, in most of your online modes, you're going to get around 15 points. So you're going to have 5 less points to work with. So keep that in mind when you're choosing these loadouts. You're not going to be able to take everything that you want to take. So your supply points are down here, and the cost of supply is on the right side here of all your attachments and all your guns. The main reason we want to consider weight is for speed. So as weight increases, your character's movement speed decreases. And this can be the difference between running up and controlling a choke point, or running up and beating your opponents to a objective point and basically picking them off as they walk in, or vice versa. So if you're running a heavier loadout, the enemy team has an advantage of possibly being able to sprint to that objective before you. So consider your weight in certain game modes if you're going to be playing fast and you're going to be rushing objectives. So the next thing is stamina. And some people find this more or less of an effect than the speed, but as weight increases, your stamina decreases. And stamina is going to affect weapon sway after you're sprinting, and your ability to hold shift, steady your weapon, and focus. So your vision's going to get a little blurred when your guy is out of breath. His weapon's going to sway left and right and all over the place. So you're going to have a hard time making long shots, and it can even sometimes affect those mid-range shots. So having a higher stamina can just help you run a little bit longer and set up and then make your shots a little bit more accurate. But some people don't care about the stamina as much because they're going to run up, they know where the enemy is going to meet them, and then they're going to recover before the enemy gets there. So that's a lot of map knowledge, but it is a consideration of what happens with the mechanics, so it's something you need to know about. In the next videos, we'll talk about my personal preferences and the attachments and what they do and things like that. But for now, that's all we're going to talk about for as far as loadouts and supplies go. I do want to cover briefly the classes, so that way you can kind of pick which class fits your playstyle. And note that some of the classes have different gun options, so if you like a certain gun, you might be forced to pick a certain class. So the first class we're going to talk about is the Commander. He's going to primarily have AR-15 type rifles, but his main role is going to be to call in fire support. He doesn't necessarily command the battlefield like you would think. He can, absolutely, if you have good voice communications and your team responds well and works well as a team. However, you know, in multiplayer games, that's not always the case. People are going to do whatever they want. So his main role is fire support. You're going to get the binoculars, which is a tactical item. You press number 4, and then you can either cycle through your options with X, or you can hold down the J button, and that should bring up the wheel, which you can select from which fire support you want at that point. All you have to do is sit in a window or a position where you can see the target that you want to locate, and then left click, and you will call in whatever fire support you have selected at that point. Now, in order to do that fire support, you have to have the observer. He is your radio, he's your call guy. He's going to call in the fire support that you have selected. He doesn't actually have to do anything physically as a player. He doesn't have to push forward, he doesn't have to push any buttons. He just has to be in proximity of the commander in order for that commander to call in the fire support. He gets basically the same loadout as the commander, so they're very similar classes other than the fact that the commander actually gets to call in the fire support. The rifleman, he is basically the same class as the observer and the commander, however he does no support roles. The loadouts are generally the same, so there's really no point in playing a rifleman if an observer or commander slot is available. They get a slight advantage of having the tactical supports, so I highly recommend picking a commander or an observer if your team needs those before picking the rifleman. However, if both of those are full and you want the guns that the observer or the commander has, the rifleman is a good choice for you. Alright, the next class we're going to talk about is the breacher. He gets shotguns, SMGs, and he does have access to short barrel rifles. However, I think the shotguns and the SMGs are the way to go to get full potential out of this class, to use it to kind of separate itself from the other classes. The shotguns are really good right now in this current patch, and probably for a while until they nerf them. The SMGs are also really good if you're good at controlling recoil. They have light recoil, and they just fire laser beams at a pretty medium to short distance. They can definitely knock down some good enemies. Next is the gunner. He's going to handle your LMGs, considering like your PKM, your M249. These have bipods that are deployable, and once those are deployed, these guns are pretty much laser beams also. They can knock down plenty of targets at medium, even long range if you're accurate. So if you can get into position with a gunner, you can get several kills in choke points, good at holding doorways, as long as you can move a little bit and not stay perfectly stationary, which we'll get into strategies and things like that in other videos. Demolitions guy, I want to open this up and show you guys some of the things available to him. He gets all the explosives, and to take full potential of this class, you definitely want to take the explosives. Otherwise, you're basically a rifleman. So grab some explosives, and if you want to take multiple, you're going to have to take an ammo carrier, because if you select an ammo carrier and then look at the right side over here of the screen, it does tell you 1 additional explosive slot for the light and 2 additional for the heavy. So if you want to take full advantage, you're going to need to take a carrier with you, so that way you can take extra explosives. Alright, so the next class is the advisor. He's going to have access to special weapons like the SKS, the SVD, the Mark 17, Mark 18, Alpha AK, the L85A2, and these are dependent on your faction, of course. So he's kind of like an advanced rifleman. He gets all the functionality depending on what weapon you take, and then he can also get some of the semi-auto sniper rifles depending on which faction you are. But a versatile class nonetheless. And then last is the marksman. He is kind of like the advisor, except for he has access to the M24 and the Mosin Nagant, which are your bolt action sniper rifles. Very strong rifles in this current patch. Pretty much one-shot kills as long as you hit in the chest or higher. And then he also has the auto snipers like the SVD and once again that Mark 14. So depending on whether or not you are accurate with the bolt action, you want a quick scope, things like that, the SVD is quite strong, the Mark 14 is quite strong, and both the bolt actions are strong choices. So that's pretty much it for the loadouts. What I recommend doing is finding a weapon platform that you're comfortable with, and then playing with the attachments a little bit, get it so it's usable for you, and then over time minimizing it, so that way you become proficient with it with as the minimal attachments, so that way if you need to minimize attachments for your loadout, you can take certain things off and you'll be just fine. So at first, play with, every attachment that you feel like you need. The foregrip, a 4x scope, things like that. Get really comfortable with it, and then just kind of reduce it down to maybe a 2x scope, take the foregrip off, just different things. Try, and then you'll get comfortable with certain situational items, and you'll be like, oh, I don't need the foregrip anymore. I can control this recoil without it. Or I don't need the 4x scope. I can do just fine with a 2x, or I can do fine with the iron sights. So over time you'll develop a good pattern of what works for you, and then we'll go into situational items in the next video and competition loadouts and certain co-op loadouts and things like that. So that's it for now. Hopefully this helps you guys decide on what loadouts to take or how to take loadouts. Alright, see you guys out there.